Same team, always. Fight fair, stay united, and build lasting love together. Written by Steve Mutuku. A word from the author. In my 23 years of marriage, I used to believe that time itself was the great teacher. I thought that if two people stayed together long enough, they would naturally grow wiser, gentler, and better at loving each other. But looking back, I have realized something important. Time alone does not teach. Revelation does. And curiosity does. In fact, revelation and curiosity beat time any day. Marriage does not mature simply because years pass. Maturity in marriage is not measured by the number of anniversaries you celebrate. It is measured by the number of awakenings you experience. Those moments when truth suddenly meets humility. Those moments when you stop assuming that you already know your spouse. And begin to grow curious again about who they are still becoming. Many couples eventually say the same quiet sentence. If only I had known this earlier. But maybe that sentence is the hidden ache inside many marriages. The ache of people who fought their way through misunderstanding. And eventually came out wiser. The ache of realizing that revelation delayed is still revelation. But it always costs time. If I could whisper one question to every couple sitting quietly in the afterglow, or the aftermath, of a disagreement, it would be this. How long will it take for you to realize that you are on the same team, always? Because love does not mature by accident. Love matures through revelation. And through the courage to stay curious about each other. Again. And again. Steve Mutuku. Author, same team, always. Preface. When love has no voice. There is a famous scene in the movie Coming to America. In the opening scene, Eddie Murphy plays a young African prince who is meeting the woman who has been chosen to be his bride. She is beautiful. She is poised. But something about her quickly feels strange. She seems voiceless. When the prince asks her what she likes, she replies politely. Whatever you like. When he asks what she enjoys doing, she answers. Whatever you enjoy. At first it seems perfect. But then he realizes the truth. She has been trained to agree. She has been trained to comply. But she has never been allowed to be herself. She was prepared for obedience. Not for connection. And in that moment, the prince understands something important. A relationship cannot thrive when one voice disappears. So he leaves everything behind and travels to America, searching for a woman who can stand beside him, not silently behind him. That scene has stayed with me for decades. Because I have seen versions of it inside real marriages. One spouse slowly silences their voice in the name of peace. They stop expressing their thoughts. They stop disagreeing. They stop bringing their full self into the relationship. And at first, it looks calm. But peace without authenticity slowly suffocates intimacy. Here is the truth. Strong marriages do not require sameness. They require two distinct people. Two people who think differently. Two people who feel deeply. Two people who may clash sometimes. But who can disagree without breaking apart. They can argue in private. And still stand shoulder to shoulder in public. And sometimes, the very traits that annoy you in your spouse today are the traits that will save you tomorrow. The partner who double-checks the locks every night might feel overly cautious. Until the night that caution matters. The spouse who pushes you to try new things might seem reckless. Until their boldness opens a door that changes your life. What you once called irritating may actually be protection. What once felt like friction may actually be balance. This book will help you see those differences in a new way. Together, we will explore why couples fight. Why some conflicts strengthen intimacy, while others quietly destroy it. And most importantly, how to transform differences into the very force that keeps love alive. Because the opposite of conflict is not peace. The opposite of conflict is distance. And distance is the real enemy of love. Introduction. Same team, different jerseys. If marriage were a sport, it would not be tennis. It would be doubles. 2 players. One side of the net. And the only way to win is to play together. But here is the problem. In the heat of daily life, many couples forget that they are teammates. A simple discussion about dinner plans suddenly feels like 2 rivals arguing across the court. A conversation about finances turns into competing campaigns. And slowly, without realizing it, spouses begin fighting harder to win against each other than to win together. But disagreement is not what destroys marriages. Forgetting that you are wearing the same jersey. That is what causes the damage. Public unity, private debate. One of the core ideas in this book is simple. You do not have to agree on everything. In fact, healthy couples rarely do. But there is one powerful principle that can protect a marriage. In public, you stand together. This does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It means protecting each other's dignity when others are watching. It means that even if you disagree privately, you refuse to embarrass or undermine each other publicly. You can survive a difficult conversation in the car on the way home. But a small disagreement can become poison if it is exposed before outsiders. Public unity sends a message. It tells the world. We may argue sometimes. But we are still on the same side. Why this book is different. Most marriage books try to teach couples how to stop fighting. This book takes a different approach. It will teach you how to fight well. Because your differences are not accidents. They are not design flaws. They are part of the design. One partner's caution balances the other's boldness. One person's optimism softens the other's realism. Handled well, friction does not damage love. It sharpens it. In the chapters ahead, we will explore why couples often clash more with each other than with anyone else. The hidden mistakes that turn normal tension into lasting hurt. And the practical ways to transform conflict into deeper connection. This book is not about pretending that disagreements do not exist. It is about learning to fight side by side, instead of face to face. Because marriage is not a battle you are supposed to win. It is a journey you are meant to finish, together. Part 1, Why Couples Clash. Every couple clashes. That's not a sign of failure, it's a sign of humanity. When you said, I do, you didn't just marry a smile and a set of dreams. You also married history, habits, fears, unspoken rules, and a way of seeing the world that isn't yours. That's why the person who can make you feel most loved can also frustrate you the most. You share space, money, schedules, family, and future, so of course you'll clash more with your spouse than with anyone else. But beneath the tension is a deeper truth. Conflict isn't the opposite of love. Indifference is. In these chapters, you'll discover why your arguments with your spouse often cut sharper than any other, why little annoyances might actually hold surprising strength, and why public unity is one of the greatest tests of loyalty. If you understand these early patterns, you can stop them from hardening into fractures, and instead use them to grow closer. Chapter 1, Why You'll Argue More with Your Spouse Than Anyone Else. We never used to fight this much when we were dating. Almost every couple has said it. And almost every couple has discovered the same truth: marriage multiplies the clashes because marriage multiplies the stakes. If you've ever thought that the person you love most is also the person you clash with most, you're not alone. At first, it feels ironic, almost wrong. Shouldn't marriage mean fewer disagreements, not more? But here's the truth. You argue more with your spouse because marriage is the most emotionally loaded, high-stakes relationship you'll ever have. The proximity effect. No one else shares as much of your time, space, and life decisions as your spouse. You can be polite with your coworkers because you see them for only a few hours a day. You can nod along with your friends because your future doesn't hinge on their opinion about whether to buy a house or how to raise children. But marriage? That's a 24/7 merger of two lives. Every choice you make affects the other. When you're that close, the smallest differences are amplified. It's not just whether they text back right away, it's whether you feel prioritized or pushed aside. It's not just whether they fix what's broken, it's whether you feel they care about the space you share. The investment principle. You fight more because you have more to lose. A stranger's disagreement won't derail your life. But your spouse's stance on money, parenting, faith, or career. That could shape decades of your future. The higher the investment, the stronger the emotions when you don't see eye to eye. It's also why couples often find it easier to agree with outsiders than with each other. An outsider's opinion costs you nothing. But with your spouse, agreeing might feel like surrendering, as if their win is your loss. And research confirms it. Studies show that couples argue more with their spouse than with anyone else, not because they're mismatched, but because of the sheer volume of shared decisions. Every joint choice, money, kids, schedules, becomes a potential point of friction. The myth of total compatibility. One of the most damaging expectations in marriage is the idea that love will make you think alike. You marry someone because you love their uniqueness, and then you spend years trying to reshape it. The irony? The very traits that first drew you to them often become the source of your biggest frustrations. That boldness you admired becomes impatience. That careful attention to detail starts to feel like nitpicking. The truth is, these traits didn't change, your perspective did. And if you can learn to see them again as complementary strengths, your conflicts can become points of growth instead of division. The reframe we'll return to. What if the goal isn't to eliminate disagreements but to handle them in a way that builds trust, intimacy, and respect? What if the friction you feel isn't a warning sign, but a natural byproduct of two strong, different people building a shared life? That's the premise we'll explore in this book, starting with the ways our differences show up in daily life and how they can either push us apart or draw us closer. More love means more arguments. Not because you're wrong for each other, but because you matter more to each other. Chapter 2, The Strength Hiding in Your Annoyance. If he double-checks that door lock one more time. Annoyance is often the first signal that what protects you is irritating you. There's a moment in almost every marriage when you look at your spouse and think, if they do that one more time. It could be the way they double-check the door locks. Or how they linger too long saying goodbye to people. Frustrating when you're late, but it's why everyone loves them. Annoyances are inevitable in close relationships. But here's the twist, many of the things that irritate you most are actually the flip side of your spouse's greatest strengths. The strength-weakness spectrum. Every trait exists on a spectrum. On one end, it's a strength. On the other, it's a weakness. And often, they're just different expressions of the same quality. That cautious husband who double-checks everything. That's also the man who keeps your finances stable and your family safe. That carefree wife who runs late. She's the same woman who doesn't panic under pressure and can make friends anywhere. The very quality that frustrates you may be the one that protects you in other situations. How perspective shifts everything. Let's say you're naturally decisive. You make quick calls, you keep things moving. Your spouse, on the other hand, likes to research, compare, and weigh options. When you want to book a vacation today, they're still reading hotel reviews next week. In the moment, it feels like they're slowing you down. But in the big picture, they're making sure you don't regret your choice. That balance, your speed and their thoroughness, keeps you from rushing into mistakes or stalling into indecision. Psychologists call this complementary friction, two opposite tendencies that create tension in the moment but long-term stability in the relationship. Research consistently shows that couples who embrace these differences as balancing forces report higher marital satisfaction over time. Reframing in the heat of the moment. The next time you feel irritation rising, try this mental shift. Instead of, "Why are they like this?" ask, "When does this trait work in our favor?" Your spouse's tendency to overprepare. That's why you never run out of diapers, gas, or snacks on a road trip. Their need to question plans. That's why you avoided signing a contract that would have cost you thousands. The same trait can be both a source of tension and a source of protection, and which one you focus on will shape how you treat your spouse. From friction to appreciation. Reframing doesn't mean you ignore what bothers you. It means you see the whole picture. And when you start noticing the upside of your spouse's flaws, something shifts. Gratitude begins to disarm annoyance. And from that place, conversations about change are less defensive and more collaborative. The truth is, marriage isn't about finding someone who matches you perfectly, it's about learning to value the ways you complete each other. And often, the road to that appreciation starts with recognizing the hidden strength inside the habit that drives you crazy. What irritates you may be the very thing saving you. Chapter 3, When Unity Breaks in Public. "That's not true," she whispered under her breath, just loud enough for the table to hear. He froze mid-sentence. The story wasn't ruined, but his confidence was. That is how unity breaks. Not with shouting matches, but with small cracks that everyone else can see. Every couple disagrees. But the setting changes everything. At home, tension can be sorted privately. In public, even the smallest contradiction becomes a performance. A correction, a sigh, or a sarcastic laugh does not simply fix details, it broadcasts disunity. And people remember the broadcast, not the backstory. They will not recall the hours of teamwork that came before. They will remember the one moment you undermined each other. Why public disagreements cut deeper. Psychologists have measured this effect. A University of Denver study found that couples who publicly undercut one another are twice as likely to report marital dissatisfaction within 5 years. Public unity is not cosmetic. It is a safeguard. The sting is sharper because it feels like betrayal. You were supposed to be teammates, yet in front of others you became opponents. And once outsiders see that fracture, they often feel free to insert their own opinions, deepening the wedge. The nudge that undermines. Public disunity is not always loud. Sometimes it slips in through the smallest signals. A whispered correction mid-sentence. A muttered, "No, that's wrong." A nudge under the table. An exaggerated sigh or an eye roll toward the ceiling. The intent may be harmless, even protective. You might want to straighten out a detail or prevent embarrassment. But the effect lands differently. It chips away at presence and confidence. What was meant as help feels like humiliation. For your spouse, it is not only about the correction but about the message: you could not trust them to carry this moment. The core truth. Public disunity corrodes trust faster than private arguments ever could. Because in the end, it is not only about what was said. It is about what was seen. Public unity is not performance. It is protection. Part 2, The Patterns That Poison Connection. Fights don't destroy marriages. Silent, creeping patterns do. It's the habit of needing to win instead of trying to understand. It's the myth that love means sameness, when real intimacy thrives in difference. It's allowing outsiders, parents, friends, or even social media followers, to wedge their way between you. It's skipping the repair after a clash and letting hurt calcify into distance. These patterns are subtle. At first, they don't feel dangerous. You shrug them off. You tell yourself you'll fix it later. But repeated over time, they drain the warmth, intimacy, and trust from a marriage until you wake up feeling more like business partners than lovers. This section doesn't just name the patterns, it exposes their poison. Because once you can see them clearly, you can break them. And breaking them is the difference between a marriage that coasts into apathy and one that fights for connection. Chapter 4, The Battle to Win Instead of the Fight to Understand. The debate at the dinner table. We talked about it already. No, we didn't. The table went silent. What started as dinner talk became a courtroom trial. James and Amina had been married for 8 years. One evening, they were at a friend's dinner party when a casual discussion about finances came up. James mentioned they were considering renovating their kitchen. Amina quickly added, "We actually haven't agreed on that yet." James felt cornered. "What do you mean?" "We've talked about it several times," he shot back. Amina's voice rose slightly. "We talked, but we never decided." The table went quiet. What had begun as a light conversation had become a public debate. Both were determined to prove their version of events. The evening ended with polite smiles, but in the car ride home the silence was heavy. No one had won. Both had lost, especially their connection. How we get here. It is one of the easiest traps for couples to fall into, turning a conversation into a competition. You know, the look, the tone, the shift. A small difference of opinion suddenly becomes a courtroom drama, complete with witnesses, cross-examinations, and closing arguments. In that moment you are no longer teammates. You are opposing counsel. The mission is no longer to understand each other. The mission is to prove the other person wrong. Why winning feels so tempting. This usually doesn't start with malice. It starts with a need to be heard, which is good and healthy. But somewhere along the way, "I want you to understand my perspective," morphs into, "I need you to admit you're wrong." The irony is that even if you win the argument, you lose something far more important: connection. The other person may give in, but they will also pull back. You gain compliance without closeness, and that is a poor trade. Part of this pull toward winning is ego. None of us like to feel foolish. But part of it is survival instinct. We are wired to defend our ground, especially when we feel misunderstood or attacked. The trouble is, the more defensive we get, the less curious we become. And here is the danger in marriage: when curiosity dies, understanding dies. And when understanding dies, intimacy begins to erode. Fighting to understand. Shifting from win mode to understand mode is not about letting go of your convictions. It is about letting go of the need to score points. Instead of thinking, "How can I make them agree with me?" ask, "What am I missing about how they see this?" That single question changes the temperature in the room. You are no longer sparring partners. You are detectives, solving the same case from different angles. A quick self-check mid-argument. The next time you feel the heat rising, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. Am I trying to understand, or am I trying to win? If I win right now, will we both feel closer afterward? What would it look like to pause this for the sake of connection? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in an argument is not to push harder but to call a timeout. Not to avoid the issue, but to preserve the relationship while you figure it out. One action today. In your next disagreement, before you speak, silently repeat to yourself, "My spouse is not my opponent. We're on the same team." Then let that truth shape your words. When you fight to win, even victory feels like loss. Chapter 5, The Myth of Marital Sameness. Why can't you be more like me? The dream of sameness feels safe. The reality is suffocating. When Edwin and Priscilla got married, they assumed that becoming one meant becoming the same. Same taste in music. Same political views. Same bedtime. Same level of social energy. It worked for a few months. Then Priscilla began to resent Edwin's need for quiet weekends, while he found her constant drive for outings exhausting. Their once dreamy, "we're so alike" story began to sound more like, "Why can't you be more like me?" One night, after yet another argument about how to spend Saturday, Priscilla blurted out, I don't even know who I am anymore. I just keep adjusting to avoid a fight. That moment broke something open. They realized they had been chasing sameness, not oneness. Tradition versus modern independence. When Arun and May married in Singapore, they too assumed oneness meant uniformity. May grew up in a traditional family where wives mirrored their husbands' choices. Arun, raised in a modern business-driven culture, expected independence to rule. At first, both tried to erase their differences. May muted her cultural instincts to please Arun. Arun downplayed his ambition so May wouldn't feel overshadowed. The more they tried to be alike, the more resentful they became. Their turning point came during Lunar New Year. May insisted on honoring her family's traditions, while Arun wanted to skip the rituals and plan a beach trip. Instead of fighting, they tried something new. May explained why the traditions mattered to her. Arun explained why independence mattered to him. That night they agreed that sameness was slowly killing them, but complementary unity could save them. Today, their marriage is richer because it honors both heritage and innovation. Why the myth persists. In many cultures and churches, oneness in marriage gets mistranslated into uniformity. We see couples who've been together for decades and assume they've merged into a single personality. We read, "The two shall become one," and forget that God never said, "The two shall become identical." Sameness feels safe because differences can be messy. When you agree on everything, there is no friction, but there is also no sharpening, no perspective shift, no challenge to grow. The danger of sameness. The pursuit of sameness carries hidden costs. You lose yourself when you erase your preferences to match your spouse. You dull each other when you stop learning from different perspectives. You breed silent resentment when suppressed differences leak out later in frustration. Sameness is counterfeit harmony. It looks peaceful but costs more than it gives. The better model, complementary unity. The healthiest marriages aren't built on sameness but on complementary unity. The ability to stand as one team while bringing different strengths to the table. Think of it like music. Two voices in unison are fine, but two voices in harmony are richer and more powerful. Edwin's caution balanced Priscilla's risk-taking. Her social energy pulled him out of isolation. His love for quiet anchored her when life felt too loud. Your differences are not flaws in the design. They are the design. How to live it out. Complementary unity begins with naming your differences without judgment. Instead of saying, "You're too quiet," you might say, "You recharge differently than I do." That simple shift removes blame and makes space for understanding. It continues with learning to value your spouse's opposite traits. Ask yourself, how does their difference protect me, or balance me, or open doors I would never walk through alone? And it grows stronger when you look for joint wins. If one of you is a homebody and the other thrives on going out, create a rhythm that honors both. Alternate weekends. Trade a movie night at home for a dinner with friends the following week. Both of you feel filled, and neither feels erased. One action today. Ask your spouse, "What's one thing you do differently from me that actually makes our marriage better?" Then listen without defending or downplaying. Just receive it. Sameness may feel easier, but unity built on difference is far more enduring. Chapter 6, Outsiders in the Marriage. I'll ask my pastor. Those 4 words nearly broke Faith. Outsiders can feel safe in the moment, but they can be lethal in the long run. When Leonard and Faith had their first big disagreement over finances, Leonard did what he had always done when confused, he called his pastor. "He just gives such good advice," Leonard reasoned. But soon, Faith began to notice a pattern. Every time they disagreed, someone else seemed to have the final say. Sometimes it was the pastor, sometimes a best friend, sometimes a colleague. But it was never just the two of them. One evening, after Leonard relayed yet another outside opinion, Faith asked quietly, "When will our marriage belong to us?" That question landed harder than any argument they had ever had. When families become third voices. This is not only a modern Western challenge. In cultures where extended families remain deeply involved, outsiders often feel like permanent third voices. In Nairobi, Samuel and Grace found themselves fighting battles that weren't entirely theirs. Each time they disagreed about money or parenting, Samuel's mother had an opinion, and she was never shy about voicing it. Grace began to feel as though she was married to a whole clan instead of one man. One night, after Samuel relayed yet another instruction from his mother, Grace broke down and said, "When will our marriage belong to us?" That question hit Samuel like a blow. He realized loyalty to his family didn't have to mean disloyalty to his wife. Together, they set a new rule: no decision would leave their house until they had first agreed privately. Over time, Samuel's mother adjusted. Their marriage began to breathe again. Not because the family disappeared, but because the couple closed their circle and defined their own unity. Why outsiders feel safe. Outsiders often provide validation without demanding vulnerability. It feels easier to tell a friend your side of the story than to sit in the discomfort of working through it with your spouse. Family members have known you longer, so you assume they understand you better. A mentor, pastor, or friend may feel like a shortcut to peace, sparing you the friction of direct conflict. But what feels safe in the moment can slowly erode a marriage from the inside. The ecosystem analogy. Your marriage is like a protected ecosystem. Its climate, its soil, its resources are designed for two people to thrive. Every time you introduce an outsider into a disagreement, you import a new species into that ecosystem. And just like in nature, even a helpful species can become invasive if it takes over. The cost of letting outsiders in. Allowing outsiders too much influence comes with a price. Divided loyalty weakens trust when one spouse consistently sides with someone else. Over time, couples also lose the ability to solve problems on their own, because others keep doing the heavy lifting. What feels like relief eventually becomes dependency. There is also a false sense of safety. Outsiders may soothe you in the moment, but they do not live with the long-term consequences of the advice they give. You do. Building outsider immunity. Protecting your marriage from overreach doesn't mean cutting off all counsel. It means creating boundaries. Ask yourself, does this person protect my marriage as much as they protect me? Are they willing to challenge me when I'm wrong, or do they only comfort me? Couples also need to practice public unity and private sorting. That means no disagreement should leave your lips until you've both tried to resolve it together. Even if you later seek wise counsel, it should never replace the first work of sitting down as a team. And in today's world, outsiders are not only people. Social media feeds, podcasts, and self-proclaimed relationship experts often speak into marriages without knowing your reality. Their influence can be just as invasive as a meddling parent. Talk openly about what kind of content you will consume together and what you will choose to ignore. One action today. Identify one person or platform that has had too much influence in your marriage. Together, decide the boundary you will set this week. It might be choosing to process conflicts privately before calling a parent, or it might be deciding which online voices are healthy to invite in. When outsiders set the tone, insiders lose their voice. Protect the circle, and let your marriage belong to you. Part 3, Turning Conflict into Connection. Conflict is not the enemy. In fact, conflict can be the tool that takes you deeper into intimacy. The goal isn't to eliminate disagreements but to learn how to fight in a way that pulls you closer instead of pushing you apart. In these chapters, you'll learn how to reframe weaknesses as strengths. Seeing your spouse's blind spots not as weapons against you but as places where you can cover and protect. You'll discover the art of disagreeing without leaving scars. You'll understand why standing united in public strengthens your private bond. And you'll see how even the daily friction of chores, finances, and stress can become a spark for deeper intimacy rather than a wedge of distance. Handled right, conflict doesn't build walls. It builds bridges. Every disagreement is an invitation. Not to prove who's right, but to rediscover who you are together. Chapter 7, The Repair After the Clash. For 2 days, they passed each other in the hallway like strangers. Dishes got done. Kids got fed. But no words crossed the silence. Finally, one of them whispered, "I hate this distance more than I hate being wrong." Michelle and David had been married for 8 years when they had what they later called the silent earthquake. It started over something small. A scheduling mix-up about picking up their daughter from school. But the argument quickly grew into a storm about who always drops the ball and who never appreciates the other. The silence stretched through the house. Meals were cooked, kids bathed, chores done, but the air stayed frozen. On the 3rd night, David broke it. "I don't even remember what we were fighting about," he said. "But I hate this distance." Michelle nodded, tears in her eyes. "Me too." That was their first taste of a truth many couples never realize: repairing the connection matters more than resolving every detail. Why repair beats resolution? Most couples assume peace comes from solving the problem. But in long-term relationships, many conflicts never get fully resolved. They repeat, cycle, or simmer in the background. What matters more is the willingness to repair, the steps you take to restore warmth and trust even if you still see the issue differently. Relationship researcher John Gottman, after decades of studying couples, found that repair attempts, even clumsy ones, are the single strongest predictor of long-term marital stability. It isn't about saying it perfectly. It's about saying something before the silence hardens. The problem of lingering distance. The real damage in marriage often comes not from the clash itself, but from the distance that follows. Arguments pass. Silence lingers. Every day spent disconnected plants seeds of resentment, insecurity, and mistrust. What makes this worse is the myth of resolution. Many couples wait until every issue is sorted before they dare to soften. But while they wait, the air grows colder. They think they are holding out for clarity. In truth, they are starving the relationship of connection. The longer distance remains unaddressed, the heavier it becomes. A small mix-up about school pickup can turn into a wall that feels impossible to scale. Why repair often fails? Couples stumble here for predictable reasons. Pride convinces them to wait for the other to go first. Anger tempts them to rehash instead of reconnect. Fear frames repair as defeat, as if reaching out means surrendering the argument. But avoidance only deepens the problem. The silence grows, and what began as a disagreement becomes a slow erosion of intimacy. The core truth. The deeper danger is not the clash. It is the failure to close the distance afterward. Unresolved problems may always exist in some form, but unrepaired disconnection is what breaks marriages apart. Resolution is optional. Repair is not. Chapter 8, Reframing, Your Spouse's Weakness as Your Covering. You're too cautious. You're too reckless. What if neither was a flaw, but a shield? Most couples spend years trying to fix each other. The cautious spouse wishes the bold one would slow down. The bold one wishes the cautious one would take more risks. The talker wants the quiet one to open up. The quiet one wants the talker to take a breath. But what if the very trait that frustrates you is also the one keeping your marriage balanced? The strength hidden in the weakness. In marriage, every trait exists on a spectrum. Push it too far in one direction, and it looks like a flaw. Bring it into balance, and it becomes protection. The cautious spouse who seems controlling is often the one who keeps the family safe from financial disaster. The bold spouse who feels reckless is often the one who moves the family forward when fear tries to freeze them. The quiet spouse who seems withdrawn can also be the one who steadies the atmosphere when emotions run high. The talkative spouse who feels overwhelming is often the one who brings energy and connection into every room. When you begin to reframe what you call a weakness as a covering, you stop fighting against it and start leaning on it. That single shift can cut marital friction in half. Tasha and Mark. Mark is a visionary entrepreneur, always dreaming big, chasing ideas, ready to bet everything on the next opportunity. Tasha, on the other hand, grew up in a family where financial security was everything. She triple-checks budgets, plans for the worst-case scenario, and sometimes freezes in the face of risk. For years, their marriage was a cycle of Mark feeling held back and Tasha feeling pushed into danger. But after nearly losing their savings to a failed business deal, Mark began to see Tasha's caution not as nagging, but as the seatbelt that kept them from going over the cliff. Tasha started to see Mark's risk-taking not as recklessness, but as the spark that created opportunities she would never pursue alone. Now, instead of arguing over who is right, they work as a team. Mark scouts opportunities. Tasha stress tests them before they commit. Together, they make better decisions than either could on their own. A practical reframe. This week, take a piece of paper and write down 3 things your spouse does that frustrate you. Next to each one, ask yourself what strength might be hidden inside that behavior. What danger might they be protecting you from? And if that trait disappeared completely, what would your marriage lose? One action for today. Tell your spouse one flaw you've started to see as a strength. And thank them for it. Because weakness, when reframed, is not weakness at all. It is covering. Chapter 9, The Art of Disagreeing Without Damaging. The fight wasn't really about the dishes. It was about dignity. About feeling heard. About wanting your voice to matter as much as theirs. Disagreement is inevitable. Damage is optional. Many couples believe the goal is to avoid conflict. In reality, the goal is to learn how to disagree in a way that builds trust rather than erodes it. When handled well, a disagreement can deepen understanding, strengthen respect, and even grow intimacy. The problem isn't that we fight. The problem is that we fight in ways that leave wounds instead of wisdom. Why disagreements turn destructive. Most arguments go wrong when they slip into destructive patterns. Scorekeeping is one of the most common. Instead of addressing the issue at hand, you drag old failures into the present, using the past as ammunition. Escalation is another. The words get sharper, the tone gets louder, and before long the original issue is lost in the noise. And then there are character attacks. You move from, "I don't like what you did," to, "You're always selfish," or, "You never care." The focus shifts from behavior to identity, and that cuts deeper than the original problem. These patterns don't just settle the current dispute. They plant seeds of bitterness that sprout in the next one. The safe zone approach. Every disagreement needs a safe zone. Boundaries that protect the relationship even when emotions run high. No public ambushes. If you disagree, save it for private unless the matter is urgent. Tone matters as much as content, so speak with the same care you hope to receive. And if emotions boil over, agree to pause before more damage is done. Andre and Melissa. Andre and Melissa had very different communication styles. Andre was quick to speak his mind, Melissa needed time to process. During one heated exchange, Andre blurted something in frustration that left Melissa wounded and withdrawn for days. Eventually, they agreed on a rule: if either of them said, "I need space," the conversation would pause for 30 minutes. No silent treatment. No storming out. Just a timeout to cool down. That single boundary transformed their arguments from explosive to constructive. Disagreeing well. Healthy disagreement follows a simple rhythm. Speak your position clearly without sarcasm or judgment. Listen for what matters most, because the surface issue often hides a deeper concern. And aim for repair, not victory. The real win is when both feel respected, even if the disagreement remains unresolved. One action for today. Before your next disagreement, agree on one safe zone rule, something that will protect your relationship when emotions rise. Because disagreement doesn't destroy marriages. Disrespect does. Chapter 10, Presenting a United Front in Public. That's not right, babe. One phrase in public can undo 100 affirmations in private. Public loyalty is one of the strongest protectors of marriage. It is not about faking harmony. It is about showing your spouse, and the world, that you are on the same team, even when you are not on the same page. When couples correct each other in front of others, even subtly, it chips away at trust. The wound is not just in the moment. It lingers in the unspoken question, if you will expose me here, what else will you expose when eyes are on us? Why public unity matters. At home, you can process freely. In public, you are performing whether you intend to or not. A correction, a dismissive laugh, a roll of the eyes, these things don't just clarify details, they broadcast disunity. And the broadcast leaves an imprint long after the conversation has ended. Public unity strengthens marriages in ways that matter deeply. It creates safety, because your spouse knows you will cover them, not cut them down. It preserves dignity, because even in disagreement you will guard their honor. And it builds influence, because when others see alignment, it becomes harder for outsiders to exploit your differences. Silent signals for private debate. Unity does not mean silence. It means timing. Healthy couples learn to send signals to one another that say, "We will sort this later." A squeeze of the hand. A glance that both understand. A note passed quietly on a phone. These cues keep the flow intact while reserving disagreement for private space. Deferral phrases that protect dignity. Sometimes words are necessary to keep a conversation moving. In those moments, couples can lean on phrases that protect dignity while deferring correction. Instead of a blunt contradiction, you might say, "We might remember it differently, let's talk when we get home." Or, "That's one version, but my spouse usually remembers this story better." The words are less important than the posture. Respect always comes before accuracy. The trust economy. Think of trust as a joint account. Every public moment is either a deposit or a withdrawal. When you back your spouse in public, you make a deposit. When you correct or contradict, you make a withdrawal. Too many withdrawals and the account runs dry. Once it does, even private clashes become harder to heal because the balance is already low. A story from the edge. Sam and Becky were rebuilding after Sam's emotional affair when, at a dinner party, he misremembered a small detail about their trip. Becky corrected him mid-sentence. To her, it was nothing. To him, it reopened the wound. Later that night he told her, "I felt like you were telling everyone you still can't trust me." From then on they made a pact. In public, they would always back each other. Corrections could wait. Within months, their friends noticed a new warmth between them. Public unity helped repair private trust. Guarding against the outsider effect. Public correction does more than bruise your spouse. It opens the door for outsiders to step into your conflict. A friend, a family member, even a stranger may weigh in. Soon it is not you and your spouse, it is you, your spouse, and a third opinion. That triangle may feel like relief in the moment, but it erodes the bond. Your marriage is a protected circle. Outsiders, even well-meaning ones, should never get a front-row seat to your disagreements. Practicing solidarity. If you want to strengthen that circle, start with one solidarity habit. It might be a private signal, a deferral phrase, or a simple no corrections in public rule unless safety requires it. Practice it consistently. Over time you will feel the difference. Unity shown in public becomes strength lived in private. Chapter 11, Turning Everyday Tension into Intimacy. It was barely a disagreement. A look. A tone. A forgotten errand. Yet the room grew colder. Dishes clattered harder than usual. Words became fewer. What began as a small spark of tension threatened to smolder into silence. Everyday tension is unavoidable in marriage. It shows up in the missed detail, the different opinion, or the stressed response after a long day. The danger is not the tension itself but what happens next. Left unaddressed, these moments of distance add up, slowly widening the space between you. But tension can also be the raw material of intimacy, if couples learn the art of repair. Why repair matters more than resolution. Many couples believe peace comes from solving the problem. But research and real-life experience show that in most long-term relationships, some conflicts never get fully resolved. They recycle in different forms. What makes the difference is repair, the intentional move to restore warmth, trust, and safety, even if you still see the issue differently. Relationship researcher John Gottman, who studied thousands of couples, found that repair attempts, even clumsy or half-hearted ones, are the single strongest predictor of marital stability. The words don't have to be perfect. The timing doesn't have to be smooth. What matters is breaking the silence before it hardens. The 24-hour connection rule. After a clash, couples have a window of about 24 hours to signal reconnection. Wait longer, and the silence begins to settle in. This doesn't mean you must resolve the argument in a day. It means you must communicate, "We're still us, even if we're still sorting this out." A touch. A word. A gesture. Small signals matter when the distance is fresh. Repair rituals that work. Repair rarely comes in dramatic speeches. It lives in small acts that whisper, "You matter more than the fight." A gentle touch, a hand on the back, a squeeze of the shoulder, holding hands on a walk. Small gestures can soften walls faster than long explanations. The "I still" statement, a quiet reassurance like, "I still love you, I still choose you," or "I still believe in us." These anchor your spouse in the security of your commitment, even while you disagree. The reset date, deliberately pausing the argument and choosing to do something you both enjoy together, with no heavy conversations allowed. Sometimes joy is the best medicine for a frayed connection. Why repair often fails. Couples often miss the chance to repair because pride convinces them to wait for the other to go first. Or they rehash instead of reconnecting, jumping back into the argument too quickly and reopening the wound. Some avoid repair because they fear it means admitting defeat. In reality, repair is not about surrendering the argument, it is about valuing the relationship above the score. One action today. Think of your last unresolved tension. Before today ends, take one step to reconnect. Send a text. Leave a note. Reach for a touch. You don't need the perfect words or the perfect timing. The perfect time is always now. Repair does not erase disagreement. It restores connection. And connection, more than resolution, is what keeps love alive. Chapter 12, Living and Deciding as a United Team. Should we move? He saw opportunity. She saw disruption. Both saw each other as the obstacle. Every marriage has two seats at the decision-making table. The trouble begins when one acts as though their seat carries more weight than the other. Unity in decision-making is not about always agreeing. It is about making choices in a way that preserves respect, trust, and the sense that you are both steering the same ship. The myth of perfect agreement. Many couples delay decisions because they believe they must see eye to eye on every detail before acting. But the truth is you don't need perfect agreement, you need mutual commitment. Once a decision is made, even if it leaned toward one spouse's preference, you both own it. Shared ownership is what prevents resentment from creeping in later. The danger is not disagreement. It is moving forward while one person quietly feels dismissed. Marital polishing, friction that refines. Think of marriage like a finely crafted blade. The sharpening stone and the metal do not agree on everything. There is friction, resistance, and heat. But handled well, that very friction creates an edge that can withstand anything. Your differences are not a threat to unity, they are the very thing that polishes you as a team. The cautious one balances the risk-taker. The visionary balances the detail-focused. The emotional responder balances the rational thinker. Instead of wishing your spouse thought like you, see their perspective as the safeguard that prevents you from making blind, one-sided decisions. The big move debate. When Marcus wanted to relocate for a new job, Elena hesitated. He saw opportunity. She saw disruption for the kids. For weeks, they argued back and forth until they paused the debate itself and chose to discuss their shared values first. They agreed that financial stability mattered. They agreed that family closeness was a priority. And they agreed that long-term career growth was important. With those values clarified, the decision became easier. They found a compromise city that honored all three. 3 questions before you decide. Before any decision, pause and ask, does this choice honor our shared values? Are we both willing to own the outcome? And if it goes wrong, will we still be us afterward? If the answer to each question is yes, then you are making decisions as a united team. 1 action for today. Choose one upcoming decision, big or small, and talk about it with the marital polishing mindset. Instead of pushing for perfect agreement, aim for alignment. Decisions do not need perfect agreement. They need perfect loyalty. Part 4, Building a Marriage That Lasts. Marriage is not built in a single vow but in countless daily choices. It's not the wedding day that makes it last, it's the stubborn commitment of the years that follow. This section zooms out to the long game. Here, you'll explore how to live with public unity and private honesty, how to guard your bond from emotional drift, how to keep desire alive when love becomes familiar, and how to keep choosing each other in the 1,000 small moments where it would be easier to look away. What makes love last isn't avoiding trouble. It's learning to repair, protect, and renew, again and again. The couples who thrive aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who keep showing up with loyalty, resilience, and tenderness, even in the struggle. In the end, a lasting marriage is less about luck and more about rhythm. Less about avoiding storms and more about learning to dance in the rain. This is where your marriage moves from simply surviving to leaving behind a legacy worth imitating. Chapter 13, Unity Rituals, Daily Practices That Cement Loyalty. Every couple walks into social settings carrying an invisible test. Will we protect each other here, or expose each other? It is not the dinner party arguments or the small corrections that slowly break marriages. It is the repeated message that your spouse cannot count on you when others are watching. Unity is not about pretending you never disagree. It is about practicing loyalty so consistently that your spouse never has to wonder if you have their back. That kind of trust does not happen by accident. It is built through rituals. Intentional, repeatable habits that turn unity into a lifestyle. The Silent Pact. In their early years, David and Leah had a habit of correcting each other in public. No, honey, it was Thursday, not Wednesday. That's not what really happened. At first it seemed harmless. But those small contradictions grew into bigger ones about money, parenting, and even each other's character. After one particularly awkward dinner where Leah contradicted David 3 times, they went home in silence. That night, they made a new rule: no public corrections unless it involved safety or urgent truth. Instead, they created a small signal, a wrist squeeze, that meant we'll talk later. Within months, something shifted. Social events no longer ended with tension. Their private talks grew more open and less defensive. They realized unity was not just about avoiding fights. It was about making loyalty visible. 40 years of loyalty signals. In a small town in Ireland, Patrick and Eileen have been married for more than 4 decades. At every social gathering, they still use the same ritual they created as newlyweds. If one is telling a story and the other notices a detail they would disagree with, they simply touch hands under the table. Later, at home, they laugh about who remembered it wrong. Friends often comment on how inseparable they seem. The truth? They disagree as much as any couple. But their ritual made public unity second nature. Eileen puts it simply: the world doesn't get a front row seat to our disagreements. That's our business. The power of rituals. A ritual is simply a small act you repeat until it shapes identity. Thriving couples do not leave unity to chance. They weave it into rhythms that make loyalty second nature. The weekly unity debrief, 10 minutes once a week to ask, did I support you well in front of others? Was there a moment I embarrassed you? How can I do better next time? These short check-ins keep the trust account balanced. The annual vision retreat, a night or weekend once a year to talk about your marriage goals, family direction, and how you want to present yourselves to the world. It is a way of renewing your team contract. It says, we are not just partners in logistics, we are partners in vision. Small loyalty signals. A private nickname, a subtle hand squeeze, an inside joke, even a protective word when someone criticizes your spouse. These micro-gestures whisper, we're in this together. Why it works. When your spouse knows you will protect their dignity in public, they become more open to hearing your perspective in private. Rituals rewire the conflict from me versus you to us versus the problem. Over time, unity stops being damage control. It becomes part of who you are as a couple. One action for today. Start one new unity ritual this week. It might be a Friday night debrief. It might be a subtle hand signal. Whatever you choose, repeat it until it becomes second nature. Unity is not proven in big speeches. It is practiced in the small, stubborn rituals that quietly say, I've got your back. Always. Chapter 14, Protecting Your Marriage from Emotional Drift. They still ate dinner together. They still said, good night. But the laughter was gone. Drift doesn't scream, it sighs. Marriages rarely collapse in a single moment. Most don't explode, they erode. Not because love vanished overnight, but because attention drifted a little further away each day. Drift is dangerous because it is almost invisible. You don't wake up one morning and decide to live like roommates. You simply stop noticing. You stop touching. You stop sharing. One day you look up and realize you know more about your phone's notifications than your spouse's heart. From lovers to logistics. Seth and Nia had been married for 18 years. Between running a business and raising 3 teenagers, they were always busy, but rarely with each other. One evening, Seth realized he didn't know Nia's favorite show anymore, or her current work stress, or even what goal she was chasing at the gym. They were functioning like co-parents and co-managers of a household, not lovers. That night, instead of collapsing into separate screens, they sat down for 30 minutes after dinner with no phones, no kids, no distractions. They called it their Tuesday touch base. No agendas, no problem solving, just reconnection. Within weeks, their laughter returned. Within months, their intimacy deepened. It wasn't therapy or a retreat that saved them. It was a ritual, small, steady, repeated. How drift starts. Drift begins in the mundane. Dinner eaten in front of the TV instead of at the table. How was your day? Shrinking to fine. Affection reduced to quick hellos and goodnights. It doesn't feel like danger. It feels like normal life. But normal life, unchecked, is where love goes to sleep. Research confirms what couples feel. Emotional drift often coincides with distraction. Couples who spend more than 4 hours a day on separate screens report a significant drop in marital satisfaction. It's not the arguments that kill connection, it's the quiet competing glow of other screens. Why drift is more dangerous than big fights. Big fights get attention. They force you to talk. Drift doesn't. It lets you believe everything is fine until one day you discover your emotional bank account is empty. Distance, not disagreement, is the silent killer of marriage. Rituals as drift prevention. Unity rituals aren't only for public loyalty, they are anchors against private drift. They keep your marriage tethered when everything else tries to pull it downstream. A weekly debrief keeps connection current. An annual vision retreat reminds you of the bigger why behind your union. Micro-loyalty signals in daily life whisper, "You're still my person, even when the world is loud." Without rituals, drift is inevitable. With them, you steer instead of drift. The drift test. Ask yourself, if nothing changed in our connection for the next 5 years, would we be closer or further apart? If the honest answer is further apart, you've spotted drift. Spotting it early is a gift. Because what you name, you can fight. One practical anchor, the micro check-in. Every day, pause to ask 2 questions. How's your heart today? And what's one thing I can do to make your day lighter? It doesn't need to be therapy every night. It's about attention. And attention, repeated, is how you steer back toward each other. Final word. Drift doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It sneaks in through silence. But couples who fight drift with rituals, weekly touch points, daily check-ins, annual retreats, create a marriage that refuses to erode. Passion isn't lost in one night. It's lost in 1,000 missed moments. And it's regained in 1,000 chosen ones. If you don't steer your marriage, the current will. Rituals are how you pick up the oars together. Chapter 15, When the Storm Hits, Fighting for Each Other in Crisis. The notice came in the mail, foreclosure. He dropped it on the table without a word. She picked it up, eyes brimming. "We can lose this house," she said softly, "but we can't lose us." Every marriage eventually faces a storm. Not the small squalls of everyday disagreements, but the kind that shakes the foundation. Job loss, illness, betrayal, grief, infertility, financial collapse. These are not the moments when love feels light or easy. They are the moments when you wonder if you'll even make it through the night, much less a lifetime. Some couples break in crisis. Others bend and come back stronger. The difference isn't luck, it's how they fight for each other instead of against each other. The diagnosis that changed everything. Ruth and James had been married 19 years when Ruth was diagnosed with breast cancer. Suddenly, their rhythm was hijacked by hospital visits, treatment schedules, and endless waiting rooms. One night, in a moment of exhaustion, James snapped. "You don't even care how hard this is for me." Ruth, bald from chemo, looked at him with tears in her eyes. "And you think this is easy for me?" It could have spiraled. But the next morning, they made a pact. No matter how scared or angry they felt, they would speak to each other, not about each other. Their crisis didn't erase the tension, but it gave them something bigger than the disease to fight for, their marriage. Not all storms are medical. Some arrive as financial collapse, stripping a couple of stability and testing their unity under pressure. Carlos and Isabella knew this firsthand. They had built their life in Houston on Carlos's steady construction job. When the company folded, so did their sense of security. Bills piled up. Friends offered advice Isabella didn't ask for. Carlos sank into silence. One night, after a shouting match about overdue rent, Isabella sat down and whispered, "We can lose this apartment, but I won't lose you." That became their mantra. Together, they sold what they could, leaned on community support, and restructured their lives. Years later, Carlos said the crisis didn't destroy them. It forced them to fight for us over stuff. The storm stripped them of comfort but cemented their commitment. Why crisis feels different. Normal disagreements scratch the surface. Crisis digs into the core. Stress amplifies everything. A forgotten errand feels like abandonment. A raised voice feels like betrayal. Survival mode dulls empathy. When you are scared or grieving, your bandwidth for patience shrinks. Crisis also reminds you that control is fragile. When the big things feel impossible to manage, couples often turn to controlling the one thing left, each other. That's why arguments during crisis cut deeper. You're not just arguing over dishes or schedules. You're arguing with adrenaline, fear, and grief flooding your system. The 3C rule for crisis conflict. When life hits hard, couples need a different playbook. A simple one is this: contain, communicate, commit. Contain the fallout. Not every thought deserves airtime during a crisis. Venting raw emotion without filter often wounds more than it heals. Agree on boundaries. If it's 2 a.m. and emotions are raging, pause until morning. Write down your rawest feelings before you speak them. Sometimes the act of writing is enough to take away the sting. Communicate what matters most. Crisis floods you with noise. Simplify your words. Instead of, "You never support me," say, "Right now, I need you to hold me." Instead of, "You don't care," try, "I feel scared and alone." Commit to the us. In a storm, your vow is not to win the argument, it is to protect the us. Remind each other out loud, "We're on the same team. We'll figure this out together. This is hard, but I'm not going anywhere." The job loss spiral. After 12 years in corporate banking, Daniel was laid off without warning. His wife, Keisha, had supported his long hours and stressful travel for years. Now the roles reversed. He spiraled into shame and withdrawal. Instead of reminding him of her own stress, Keisha repeated one phrase whenever tension rose. "This job changed, but we didn't. We're still us." That line became their anchor. Daniel later said it was the one thing that kept him from sinking into despair. What not to do in crisis. Crisis magnifies mistakes, and some are especially costly. Don't outsource your pain too quickly. Outsiders may mean well, but your marriage is the primary circle. Let others support you, not replace your connection. Don't weaponize vulnerability. Never turn your spouse's breakdown into ammunition later. Remember when you lost it? And don't freeze intimacy. Physical touch, a hand on the back, a hug, sitting close, is oxygen during crisis. Withdrawal only deepens the isolation. One practical anchor, the 10-minute touch point. When everything feels out of control, small rituals hold you steady. Here's one: spend 10 minutes every day during crisis asking 2 questions. How are you, really? And what do you need from me today? No solving. No debating. Just presence. These micro moments remind you that even in the storm, you're not alone. Final word: crisis as a forge. Crisis will either melt you down or forge you into something stronger. The difference is not whether you fight, but whether you fight each other or fight for each other. When the storm hits, your marriage doesn't need perfect answers. It needs stubborn presence. It needs 2 people who can say through tears, "We're scared. We're hurting. But we're still us." That's how love survives the storm. Chapter 16, Keeping the Spark Alive in Long-Term Love. We love each other, but it feels flat. Elena said it out loud, and Mark finally nodded. Sparks don't die in one night. They fade when play turns into productivity. The spark isn't only about butterflies or bedroom chemistry. It's the everyday electricity between you, the look across the room, the private joke, the way your hand naturally finds theirs without thinking. Over time, life has a way of dimming that light. Not because you've stopped loving each other, but because the things that compete with love, deadlines, bills, exhaustion, keep winning the race for your attention. The truth? Sparks don't survive by accident. They survive because you keep striking the flint. Why sparks fade? Predictability can feel safe, but if you stop adding new experiences, it dulls wonder. Neglected playfulness is another thief. Play gets replaced with productivity until you find yourselves running a household instead of enjoying a relationship. And unspoken resentments, the small hurts left unaddressed, slowly drain desire. The spark doesn't vanish because of one failure. It fades when the rhythms of love are left unattended. The spark comeback. Elena and Mark had been married for 21 years. They loved each other, but both admitted the romance felt flat. One evening, Elena suggested something simple. Let's each plan one surprise date a month. Anything goes, as long as it's not dinner and a movie. In the first 3 months, they had a sunset picnic at the beach, took a salsa class, and laughed the whole time, and even tried an overnight train trip. The result? They were texting each other playful messages again, even during work hours. The spark was back, not because it magically returned, but because they lit it. How to keep the spark alive? Curiosity is fuel. Keep asking your spouse new questions, even if you've been together for decades. People evolve. Find out who they are today. Risk is bonding. It doesn't have to be dangerous, just unfamiliar. Try cooking a new cuisine, volunteering together, or swapping your usual routines for something different. Flirting is timeless. A playful text, a whispered compliment, brushing your hand against theirs in the kitchen, these small gestures keep desire on simmer. And don't neglect physical closeness. Not just sex, but hugs, hand-holding, and unhurried kisses. Touch is glue. It binds you in ways words cannot. The myth of, we don't need to try anymore. Some couples believe effort kills authenticity, that if it doesn't happen naturally, it must be forced. But intentional effort is what keeps love alive. You didn't stop brushing your teeth after the honeymoon phase, why stop tending to romance? Love isn't less real because it's chosen daily. In fact, it's more real. Practical step. The 3-touch rule. Every day, aim for 3 intentional, affectionate touches, not just in passing, but with awareness. A morning hug. A midday shoulder squeeze. A lingering goodnight kiss. These simple acts keep intimacy within reach, even in the busiest seasons. Closer. The spark isn't about recreating the past. It's about creating the next version of your love, one that's seasoned, stronger, and still alive with warmth. Sparks don't survive by accident. They survive because you keep striking the flint. Chapter 17, Choosing Each Other Daily. The alarm buzzed. He reached for his phone. She reached for her planner. For weeks, their mornings had been all business, no warmth. One day, she stopped him. 5 minutes. Coffee first. I need us before the world. Love isn't secured by the vows you made years ago. It's secured by the choices you make today. Every morning, you wake up with the chance to say I do again. Not in a tuxedo or a gown, not with witnesses or music, but in the quiet decisions that stack up to become a life. The 5-minute couch. After 14 years of marriage, David and Priya realized their mornings had turned into a sprint: coffee, emails, kids' backpacks, car keys. One day, Priya said, "We live in the same house, but I miss you before 9 a.m. They made one simple change. Before picking up their phones, they sat together on the couch for 5 minutes with coffee. No logistics. No planning. Just connection. It wasn't dramatic. But it was decisive. That ritual reminded them daily, I choose you before the noise of the world. Why daily choice matters. Seasons change. Careers shift. Bodies age. Disappointments arrive. If you don't keep choosing your spouse, convenience or distraction will choose for you. Marriages rarely collapse from one dramatic betrayal. They collapse from the slow erosion of daily neglect. Autopilot is the enemy of intimacy. Small choices with big impact. Choosing each other daily is not about grand gestures. It lives in the ordinary. It's listening instead of rushing to defend. It's asking before assuming. It's noticing what they did right before pointing out what they missed. It's putting down your phone long enough to look in their eyes. It's saying, we're us before we're me. These choices don't take hours. They take intention. And over time, they build the unshakable sense that no matter what changes around you, you are still each other's first call. The 5 daily commitments. Think of them as a rhythm, not a checklist. Listen first, stay curious, speak gratitude, pause for presence, and protect the us. Make these part of most days and you won't just keep your marriage alive, you'll keep it strong. Final word. Daily choices don't always look romantic. Sometimes it's forgiving when you'd rather stew. Sometimes it's brewing coffee when you're tired. Sometimes it's silence when your pride wants a speech. But over time, those small, stubborn choices form the heartbeat of a lasting marriage. The wedding I do was beautiful. But it's the quiet, daily I still do that keeps love alive. Conclusion, same team, always. Every marriage has a rhythm. Some days it flows. Some days it clashes. What matters most isn't avoiding the offbeat moments. It's remembering you're still on the same dance floor. The power of the team us mindset. Fights aren't proof your marriage is broken. They're proof you're human. Same team always means you stop trying to win against each other and start winning with each other. It's a shift from competition to cooperation, from me versus you to us versus the problem. Public unity. Private debates are fine. Public undermining is not. Show the world you're for each other, even when you're not fully on the same page. Protecting your spouse's dignity in front of others makes your marriage safer behind closed doors. Repair over resolution. Not every fight will end in agreement. But every fight can end in repair. Sometimes repair is a hand squeeze under the table. Sometimes it's a text that says, I love you. Sometimes it's an invitation back to the conversation after silence. Repair keeps you strong even when the issue remains unsolved. The daily choice. Marriage isn't secured by the one vow you made years ago. It's secured by today's vow, and tomorrow's, and the next. Love lasts because of small, stubborn choices stacked over time. Final charge. Disagree better. Fight fair. Love boldly in public and tenderly in private. Guard your marriage from outside noise. Choose us over me. And when the dust settles, the goal is not to be right. The goal is to be together. Same team, always.